stately plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather in which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him by the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Come up, Kinch, come up, you fearful Jesuit." That is about as far as most people get when attempting to read James Joyce's Ulysses. Not what you'd call easy reading. But why? I mean, it's basically a very simple story. Two men, Steve and Daedalus, stand in for the young James Joyce, and Leopold Bloom, the middle-aged Jewish advertising salesman, make their way through the labyrinth of Dublin one day in June 16th, 1904. They eat, drink, laugh, cry, and carry out numerous bodily functions. Not the stuff of great literature, you might say. In fact, some of the reviews, well, maybe one of you would like to come up and read some of the reviews of the day. As I was saying, some of the reviews of the day read like this.
The most infamously obscene book in ancient or modern literature. Sunday Express.
Our first impression is that of sheer disgust. Daily Express.
A perverted lunatic who has made a specialty of literature of the latrine.
I don't envy anyone who has to read it for pleasure.
Enough to make a Hottentot sick. Sporting Times.
But this was bold ground that Mr. Joyce was breaking. I mean, when did Dickens' David Copperfield ever have a bowel movement? Or Hamlet have a wank watching Ophelia behind the arras? But don't be shocked. This course is designed painstakingly for those underachievers in the audience, and especially of those who have never read the book and have absolutely no intention of ever doing so. Now, before we get started on our expedition, we have a few tools that will help make your way through the maze a little easier. But first off, the day. What's so significant about June 16th, 1904?
Bastille Day.
Casual dress?
Administrative Assistant Day.
That was the day that James Joyce met the red-haired, dark-haired woman who would be the consuming passion of his life, Nora Barnacle. The violets were scenting the woods, Nora displaying their charms to the bees, When I first said I loved only you, Nora, and you said you loved only me.
What a guy. How great a love that must have been to write your greatest work about the day you first met the love of your life.
Now, James Joyce thought that the story of the Odyssey by Homer was the most human and heroic story in literature. So he based his tale of the everyman Leopold Bloom on that Greek classic of Odysseus, also known by his Latino name, Ulysses, and his struggle to return to his beloved wife, Penelope, after the Trojan War. Now, Bloom must have undertaken his own personal odyssey, not just to fight the gods and monsters on his way home to his wife and family, but have to deal with the suitor for his wife's affections. In Bloom's case, the dashing Blazes Boylan.
The action takes place in 18 chapters spaced approximately 1 hour apart, starting at 8 a.m. on Thursday, 16 June 1904, and ending in the early hours of June 17th.
When writing the book, Mr. Joyce used chapter titles that referred to Homer's original story, but when the book was finally published in 1922, those titles were left out.
But over the years, readers and scholars have always referred to the chapters with their original names. So, for the sake of clarity, we'll use them tonight.
Now, for many of the chapters, Mr. Joyce also used different organs of the body as a reference point, the liver, the heart, and so on. Now, my assistant here will alert us to the appropriate body part.
I'm lost already.
As Shakespeare said, all shall be revealed in the fullness of time. So without further much ado about nothing, we present to you
Ulysses for Beginners.
Chapter 1, Telemachus. Telemachus, son of Ulysses and Penelope.
Time, 8:00 a.m.
Scene, a Martello Tower, erected by the British to repel French invasion during the Napoleonic Wars.
Sandy Cove on the shore of Dublin Bay, 7 miles southeast of Dublin.
Stephen Dedalus, the stand-in for Odysseus' son, is living in this tower on the beach with his friend Buck Mulligan, a medical student, and an Englishman from Oxford called Haynes. They prepare for the day. Now, the ever-considerate Buck Mulligan continues to harass Stephen Dedalus for refusing to pray at his own mother's deathbed.
You could have knelt down, damn it, when your dying mother begged you with her last breath to pray for her. There is something sinister in you.
Do you remember the first day I went to your house after my mother's death? Your mother asked who was in your room. You said, "Oh, it is only Dedalus whose mother is basely dead."
Did I say that? What harm? You saw only your mother die. I see them pop off every day.
Now, they had breakfast, and Buck Mulligan makes the tea.
When I makes tea, as old Mother Grogan said, and when I makes water, I makes water. God send you don't mix them in the one pot.
An old woman enters, a wandering crowed, lowly form of an immortal, serving her conqueror and her gay betrayer. Now, Haynes, with his interest in the native Irish tongue, starts a conversation with her in Gaelic. Mora na medin dit.
Is it French you are talking, sir?
Now, I think we have a little theme here. Milk, old hag, a stand-in for Ireland, and an Englishman sucking the mother's milk out of her till she's dry. Now, they leave the tower so that Mulligan can take his morning swim in the ocean.
The snot green sea, the scrotum tightening sea.
They meet a friend who gossips about a certain friend named Bannon and a young girl he's dallying with who will turn out to be Millie, Leopold Bloom's daughter. Cad.
Mulligan borrows the key to the tower and tuppence from Stephen, who, like the usurped Telemachus, wanders off to begin his journey to find the father he has never met.
I will not sleep here tonight. Home also I cannot go. A voice, sweetened and sustained, called to him from the sea.
End of chapter 1. Now, that wasn't so bad, was it?
And there are only 17 more to go.
Chapter 2, Nestor.
Time, 10:00 a.m.
Scene, a private boys' school in Dalkey, a village about a mile southeast of the Martello Tower.
Now, in the Odyssey, Telemachus, here young Stephen, goes to see the well-meaning but boring old Nestor to hear about the Trojan War and to find out about his father. Nestor, an old fool, knows only that his father, Ulysses' homecoming will not be easy.
Duh.
In this chapter, the boys' school that Stephen teaches at is not unlike the school that James Joyce taught in.
Hugh Cochrane, What city sent for him?
Tarentum, sir.
Very good. Well,
There was a battle, sir. I forget the place, sir. 279 BC.
Asculum, Stephen said, glancing at the name and date in the Gorsgard book.
Yes, sir. And he said, another victory like that, and we're done for.
After class, Stephen has a meeting with the headmaster, Mr. Deasy, an Irishman too much in love with the ways of the English.
Do you know what is the proudest word you will ever hear from an Englishman's mouth? I paid my way. I never borrowed a shilling in my life. Can you feel that? I owe nothing. Can you?
He pays Stephen his wages, but not without a lecture on the value of a shilling. Shades of Hamlet, do we see?
Neither a borrower nor a lender be.
And this is not the last reference to Shakespeare we shall have.
Mr. Daisy gives Stephen an article he's written about hoof and mouth disease and asked him to get it published in the paper for him, but not before making some crude joke about the Jews.
Mark my words, Mr. Dedalus, England is in the hands of the Jews, and they are the signs of a nation's decay. Ireland, they say, has the honour of being the only country which never persecuted the Jews. Do you know that? No. And do you know why?
Why, sir?
Because she never let them in.
A cough ball of laughter leaped from his throat, dragging after it a rattling chain of phlegm.
She never let them in.
Clever man.
But enough of the sleazy, Mr. Deasy. Let's move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 3, Proteus. The sea god of many shapes tells of the fate of Ulysses, marooned and in bondage on Calypso's island.
Ineluctable modality of the visible, at least that, if no more, thought through my eyes.
Time, 11 o'clock a.m.
Scene, the beach along Sandy Mount Strand.
Now, let's go back to the first line of this chapter. Stephen says...
Ineluctable modality of the visible, at least that, if no more, thought through my eyes.
This is the chapter where readers say, what the hell does that mean? And then puts the book in the Goodwill bin. Now, I admit it's as slippery as the shape-shifting god Proteus. Most of the time, I instruct students just to skip it and move on to the juicier bits. But not today. Ineluctable modality of the visible. Well, you see, it alludes to the Aristotelian idea that when we look at something, the thing itself is not part of what we see. See? What's important about this chapter is that it's the first time we see the use of the device that the novel would become famous for. Stream of consciousness. The interior monologue, or as the French say, le monologue intérieur. It's Stephen is walking on Sandy Mount Beach. The things that he is seeing and hearing are racing through his mind.
Stephen closed his eyes to hear his boots crush crackling rack and shells.
You are walking through it, howsoever. I am, stride at a time. Open your eyes. No! Jesus, I am getting along nicely in the dark. My ash sword swings at my side. Tap with it. They do. Open your eyes now. I will. One moment. Has all vanished since. If I open, and am forever in the black adiaphany. Basta, I will see if I can see. See now! There. All time without you, and ever shall be. A world without end.
Stephen sees a midwife.
They came down the steps from Leahy's terrace prudently. Frauenzimmer, and down the shelving shore, flabbily, their splayed feet sinking in the silted sand.
Number 1 swung lordily her midwife bag.
What has she in the bag? A misbirth with a trailing navel cord, hushed in ruddy wool. The cords of all link back, cable of all flesh.
Now, Stephen wonders if you could use the umbilical cord as a telephone back to Adam and Eve.
Hello? Kinch here. Put me on to Edenville. LF Alpha, not 1. Must forget the letter for the press. After. Ship. 12. By the way, go easy with that money like a good young imbecile. Yes, I must.
His mind wanders back to a visit to an uncle.
In his broad bed, Uncle Richie, pillowed and blanketed, extends over the hillock of his knee a sturdy forearm. Clean chested, he has washed the upper moiety.
Would you like a bite of something? None of your damned la-di-da airs here. The rich of a rasher fried with a herring? Sure. So much the better. We have nothing in the house but backache pills.
Cousin Stephen, you will never be a saint. Isle of Saints. You were awfully holy, weren't you? You prayed to the Virgin that you might not have a red nose.
You prayed to the devil in Serpentine Avenue that the fumpsy widow in front might lift her clothes still more from the wet street. Oh, say certo.
More? Tell me more still. On the top of the house tram, alone, crying in the rain, naked women! Naked women! What about that, eh?
What about what? What else were they invented for?
What about that? Stephen's young mind is a very fertile place, and so is his nose.
Handkerchief. He threw it, I remember. Did I not take it up? No, I didn't. Better buy one.
He laid the dry snot picked from his nostril on the ledge of a rock carefully.
For the rest, let look who will. Behind, perhaps there is someone.
I think we'll turn to the next chapter.
Chapter 4, Calypso.
Not that Calypso. We're talking about another island where Ulysses imprisoned for 7 years and forced to be the love slave of Calypso the nymph.
Nice work if you can get it.
Somewhat like our hero, Leopold Bloom, bound by his obsession for his less than faithful opera-singing wife, Molly Bloom.
Time, 8:00 a.m.
Scene, Leopold Bloom's house, 7 Eccles Street, in the northwest quadrant of Dublin.
And our first organ.
Organ. Kidney.
Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate the fine tang of faintly scented urine.
The story is looping back in time. And now we meet Leopold Bloom, a Jewish advertising salesman. Bloom is preparing breakfast for himself and his wife and his cat before departing for Patty Dignam's funeral.
Meow. Meow.
Now, for some reason, the cat speaks Japanese.
Afraid of the chuk-chuks? I never saw such a stupid pussins. What's for breakfast? Ham and eggs? No. Better a pork kidney at Douglas's. I'm going around the corner, Molly. You don't want anything for breakfast?
The jingling springs of the bed upstairs tells that his wife Molly is awake.
Bloom is about to begin his wanderings, just like Ulysses in the Odyssey. But first, breakfast. He enters a butcher's and buys a pork kidney.
His hand accepted the moist, tender gland and slid it into a side pocket.
He fantasizes about a woman customer in the butcher's shop.
Vigorous hips, strong pair of arms, whacking a carpet on the clothesline. She does whack it, by George. The way her crooked skirt swings at each whack. Pleasant to see first thing in the morning.
Bloom returns home and finds 2 letters and a card on the hall floor.
The one addressed to Mrs. Marion Bloom, Molly's stage name, is from none other than the nasty, straw-hatted impresario Blazes Boylan, who is producing Molly's next engagement, singing and otherwise. But Bloom is as enslaved to Molly as Ulysses was to Queen Calypso.
Entering the bedroom, he half closed his eyes and walked through the warm, yellow twilight towards her tousled head.
Who are the letters for?
A letter for me from Molly, and a letter for you.
Letting the blind up by gentle tugs halfway, his backward eye saw her glance at the letter and then tuck it under her pillow.
Hurry up with that tea, she said. I'm parched. Porty,
What?
scald the teapot.
Now Bloom goes down to the kitchen and puts on the kidney and prepares Molly's tea. He reads a letter from his daughter and muses.
Oh, Millie Bloom, you are my darling. You are my looking glass from night to morning. I'd rather have you without a farthing than Katie Keogh with her ass and garden.
Now this might be a good point to tell you that Leopold and Molly lost the child, a boy named Rudy, who died at 11 days.
He prodded a fork into the kidney and slapped it over, then fitted the teapot on the tray. Its hump bumped as he took it up. Everything on it, bread and butter, flour, sugar, spoon, or cream. Yes. He carried it upstairs, his thumb hooked in the teapot handle.
She set the brasses jingling as she raised herself briskly, an elbow on the pillow.
What time is the funeral?
11, I think, he answered. I didn't see the paper.
There's a smell of burn, she said. Did you leave anything on the fire?
The kidney!
Now, at this point, Leopold Bloom contemplates the failure of his life and the disarray of his house. He ends the chapter taking a humor magazine called Tidbits with him to visit the outhouse. Quietly, he reads,
That slight constipation of yesterday quite gone. Hope it's not too big, bring on piles again. No, just right.
TMI. The day is about to begin.
Chapter 5, Lotus Eaters.
Time, 10 a.m.
Scene, Bloom wanders through Dublin.
Organ, genitals.
Now, what do we mean by Lotus Eaters? Dublin's answer to the Great Wall all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet? No.
In the Odyssey, Ulysses tells of an earlier adventure when his men ate flowers, which drugged them.
And made them forget about going home.
Until Ulysses drives these Homeric druggers back to the ship and sets sail.
As our hero Leopold Bloom sets out on his morning errands, he is also intoxicated by the sights and sounds and smells of Dublin, and of the excitement of a letter that Mr. Bloom, a.k.a. Henry Flower, maybe a Lotus, is at a mailbox picking up a letter from his pen pal, Martha.
The name is Flower, Henry Flower. Are there any letters for me? Thank you.
Dear Henry, I am sorry you did not like my last letter. Why did you enclose the stamps? I wish I could punish you for that.
Are you not happy in your home, you poor naughty boy?
Oh, how I long to meet you, Henry dear. Do not deny my request before my patients are exhausted.
Then I will tell you all. Goodbye, not naughty darling, Martha.
P.S. Do tell me what kind of perfume does your wife use? I want to know.
Leopold meets a friend who inquires why he's dressed in mourning.
The sad thing about our poor friend Paddy, poor little Paddy Dignam.
Why? What's wrong with him?
Now, Bloom sees an enticing, wealthy woman leaving the Grosvenor Hotel.
Proud, rich, silk stockings, like that haughty creature at the polo match. Watch, silk, flash, rich stockings, white. Watch.
What's wrong with him?
What's wrong with him? He's dead.
He unrolled the newspaper baton idly and read idly.
What is home without Plumtree's potted meat? Incomplete. With it an abode of bliss.
Perhaps an allusion to poor Paddy Dignam about to be potted in the ground. Now, Bloom meets a man named Lyons.
Hello, Bloom. Show us the paper. I want to see about that French horse that's running today.
Ah, Lions, you can keep it. I was going to throw it away.
What's that? Throw away.
He sees that throwaway is a horse running that day.
I'll risk it.
Bloom finishes his errands by buying a facial lotion from Molly and a bar of sweet lemony soap for his bath.
Recline in it at full in a womb of warm, oiled, scented, melting soap softly lay.
Chapter 6, Hades.
Time, 11 a.m.
Scene. A funeral carriage travels from Patrick Dignam's house in Sandymount to Prospect Cemetery in Glasnevin, North Dublin.
Organ, heart.
Now, Circe advises Ulysses to go to hell, literally, down to the realm of the dead for advice on his course of action. Mr. Bloom joins a group of men in the carriage to take poor Paddy Dignam down to Hades.
Martin Cunningham first poked his silk-hatted head into the creaking carriage and, entering deftly, seated himself. Mr. Power stepped in after him. Come on, Simon.
After you, Mr. Bloom said.
Mr. Daedalus covered himself quickly and got in, saying, "Come along, Bloom."
There's a friend of yours gone by on Sandymount Strand, Daedalus.
Who is that?
Your son and heir.
Was that Mulligan card with him? He's in with a low-down crowd. That Mulligan is a contaminated, double-eyed ruffian by all accounts. I won't have that bastard ruin my son.
Full of his son. He is right. If little Rudy had lived, something to hand on. My son, me in this eyes. Must have been that morning she at the window watching two dogs at it.
Give us a touch, Polly. God, I'm dying for it.
How life begins.
How do you do?
Who's that, Jack?
Blazes boiling.
Now, you remember him? The one who's jingling Molly Bloom's bed springs? Seems the whole city knows. Boylan is planning a concert tour with Molly Bloom.
How's the concert tour getting on, Bloom? Are you going yourself?
Well, no.
The group finds other ways to insult Mr. Bloom.
Look, a child's funeral. Sad.
Poor little thing. It's well out it.
But the worst of all is the man who takes his own life, the greatest disgrace to have in a family.
Bloom's father poisoned himself.
Non enters in judicium cum servotur Domine.
Makes them feel important to be prayed over in Latin. Every mortal day a fresh batch. Middle-aged men, children, women dead in childbirth, consumptive girls with little sparrows' breasts. Says Dignam is going to paradise. But he has to say something over now.
They tell the story that two drunks came out here one foggy evening and found the grave of a friend. One of the drunks spelt out the name, Terence. Mulcahy. The other drunk was blinking up at a statue of our Saviour that the widow had got up. Not a bloody bit like the man, says he. That's not Mulcahy, whoever did it.
Let us leave Hades and return to the land of the living.
Extra, extra! Read all about chapter 7, Aeolus.
Extra, extra! Time, 12 noon.
Read all about scene. Takes place at the newspaper office of the Freeman's Journal in the centre of Dublin.
Extra body part in this chapter happens to be lungs.
Extra, extra!
All right, okay. Now, Ulysses reaches Aeolia, ruled by none other than Aeolus, who is the warden of the winds. Aeolus tries to help Ulysses in his journey by trapping wind in a bag.
Hence the expression, old windbag.
Within sight of home, the weary Ulysses falls asleep at the tiller. His men, thinking he has treasures in the bag, opens it, and the winds blow the ship back to Aeolia, where Aeolus refuses any further help. Chapter 7 takes place in the home of the windbags. Extra, extra, read all about it. Whole chapter filled with fake and slightly racy newspaper headlines.
Extra diminished digits prove too titillating for frisky frumps.
Leopold Bloom there to place ad for keys, purveyor of tea, wine, and spirits.
Oh, slightly rambunctious females.
Stephen and Bloom narrowly miss each other again.
Extra Ithacan's vow, pen his chair.
Editor tries to get Stephen to write article for paper.
Extra dames donate Dublin sit speed pills.
Newsboys make fun of Bloom behind his back.
Extra, some call 'em, that's what Wadler once said.
Everyone in the whole paper goes for a drink.
Bloom wanders off to the National Library.
Extra, extra, extra!
Extra, extra. Chapter ends. Thank God.
Chapter 8, Lestrygonians, the land of the cannibals.
Time, 1 p.m.
After 1, time ball on the ballast office is down.
Scene, across O'Connell Bridge for lunch at Davy Byrne's pub, and then to the National Library.
Time for Pepto-Bismol. Organ, esophagus.
Now, if Lotus Eaters was about smell, chapter 8 is about food. Food, glorious food, something that Mr. Joyce did not get a lot of at all times.
Pineapple rock, lemon plat, butterscotch.
A sugar-sticky girl shoveling scoopfuls of creams for a Christian brother.
His oyster eyes staring at the postcard.
Pyramids in sand, built on bread and onions.
Look at the woe-begun walk of 'em. Eating a bad egg, poached eyes on ghost.
Hot nocturnal vapor and steam of new baked jam puffs roly-poly poured out from Harrison's. The heavy noon reek tickled the top of Mr. Bloom's gullet.
Now, while Bloom makes his way to lunch, he sees some men wearing sandwich boards. You see, more food. He has a conversation with Mrs. Breen, an old flame who was waiting for her crazy husband.
Woke me up in the night, she said. Dream he had a nightmare. Said the ace of spades was walking up the stairs.
The ace of spades. Meshuggah. Office chump.
Now, Bloom's first stop for lunch is a place called Burton's.
His heart astir, he pushed in the door of the Burton restaurant. Stink gripped his trembling breath. Pungent meat juice, slop of greens, seedy animals. Feed.
Perched on high stools by the bar, hats shoved back at the tables, calling for more bread, no charge. Swilling, wolfing gobfuls of sloppy food, their eyes bulging, wiping wetted mustaches.
A pallid, suet-faced young man polished his tumbler, knife, fork, and spoon with his napkin. New set of microbes.
A man with an infant's sauce-stained napkin tucked round him, shoveled gurgling soup down his gullet.
A man spitting back on his plate, half masticated, gristle, cold teeth, to chew it, chomp from the grill.
Swedish warmer cigarette, reek of blood. Ferment.
Couldn't eat a morsel here. I hate dirty eaters. Get a light snack in Davy Byrne's stopgap. Keep me going. Had a good breakfast.
On to Davy Burns for a sandwich and a glass.
Chapter 9, Scylla and Charybdis.
Time, 2:00 p.m.
Scene, the National Library.
Organ, the brain.
Now, in the Odyssey, Ulysses must steer between Scylla, the six-headed monster, and Charybdis, the treacherous whirlpool. Now, does anybody know what the analogy that Mr. Joyce is going for in this chapter?
The twin cliffs of Aristotelian and Platonic thought, between a rock and a hard place.
Stephen arrives at the reading room of the National Library of Ireland to discuss a theory of his with several talkative scholars.
He tries to prove by algebra that Hamlet's grandson is Shakespeare's grandfather and that he himself is the ghost of his own father.
What? Stephen, it's very lengthy explanation with lots of very sly and clever references to all of Shakespeare's plays. But the theory is this. In Hamlet, Shakespeare tries to compensate for a sexual wounding perpetrated by his older and more experienced wife, Anne Hathaway.
He suggests that Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, who died young, was perhaps conceived adulterously by his wife and one of his brothers.
Now, Richard or Edmund, who are always villains in Shakespeare's plays.
This would be the reason for Shakespeare's self-exile in London.
Where he would write Hamlet.
Casting himself in the murdered father's role.
The ghost.
In a sense, Hamlet would be the true offspring of the relationship between Shakespeare and his wife.
What?
That's a little bit simplistic, but you get the idea of what's going on in this chapter.
Chapter 10, Wandering Rocks.
Time, 3:00 p.m.
Scene, the streets of Dublin.
Organ, blood.
Well, we've reached the halftime of the book, and an exciting 30 minutes been packed full of twists and turns, but not as many as you're going to see in Chapter 10, Wandering Rocks. Father Kennedy strolls east, then south, takes a tram north. Kelleher chats with a policeman on the trail. A one-legged sailor gets a coin from Molly. Stephen's sister arrives home from school. Blaze is boiling, buys presents from Molly. Stephen Dennis and Buck Mulligan leaving the National Library. Boylan's secretary gets instructions from BB by phone and passes them along. Bloom buys a dirty book from Molly. Dilly Denlis tries to get money from her skinflint dad, who was drinking at the Oval Bar. Kernan east towards the Ormond Hotel. Stephen meets Dilly at the book cart. Tisdale Farrell wanders the street. Oh, he's off his rocker. Paddington dawdles east. The Viceroy's cavalcade leaves for Trinity Park. Trinity down to Lantern. And the winner is the Viceroy by a nose. Nope. He's been disqualified for doping. The winner is Medina.
Chapter 11, Sirens.
Time, 4 p.m.
Scene, the concert room saloon at the Ormond Hotel, Ormond Quay.
Organ, ear.
Now, after that romp through Dublin, we finally get back to our hero, Leopold Bloom, and our story. This chapter is referred to as Sirens, the bewitching creatures whose song tried to lure Ulysses and his men to their deaths.
On the rocks with a twist.
And this chapter is all about song. Musical instrument. It's a fugue.
Chips picking chips off rocky thumbnail chips.
Blue, blue, Bloom is on the
Gold pinnacled hair.
Peep, who's in the peep of gold?
Jingle, jingle, jaunted jingling.
Coin rang, cock clacked.
Jingle blue.
horn, half horn.
Full tup, full throb.
Warbling, allure, alluring.
Clap, clop, clip, clap, clappy clap.
Listen,
Deep sounding do ben do.
big ben, big ben.
Twee, little windpipe twee.
Done. And begin.
Chips picking chips off rocky thumbnail chips.
Bloom is on the
Gold pinnacled hair.
Peep who's in the peep of gold.
Jingle, jingle, jaunted jingling.
Coin, rang, clock, clack.
Jingle blue.
horn, half horn.
Full tup, full throb.
Warbling, allure, alluring.
Clap, clop, clip, clap, clappy clap.
Listen,
Deep sounding doob and doo.
big bedman, big bedman.
Whee, little windpipe, whee.
Done. Now, the two barmaids at the Ormond Hotel are the Sirens, drawing wanderers to the bar. Simon Daedalus is the first victim.
And what did the doctor order today, Mr. Daedalus?
Well, now I think I'll trouble you for some fresh water and a half glass of whiskey.
Bloom enters for his supper.
Oh, greasy eyes. Imagine being married to a man like that, she cried.
Married to the greasy nose. Married to Bloom, to grease a Bloom. Oh, Miss Deuce, you hard thing.
Adding insult to injury, Blazes Boylan stops in for a pop before he popped Molly Bloom.
Jingle jaunted down the quays. Blazes sprawled on bounding tires.
There's the sound of Molly's bed springs again. And a singer in the bar gives a rendition of the classic song of betrayal, The Croppy Boy, as Bloom writes to his little pen pal Martha. At Geneva barrack that young man died, and at Passage they have his body laid. Good people who live in peace and joy, breathe a prayer and a tear for the croppy boy.
Afterwards, Bloom passes out of the restaurant.
And then passes gas.
Chapter 12. Cyclops.
Time, 5 p.m.
Scene, the tavern, Barney Kiernan's pub, Little Britain Street. Decorating the bar are Kiernan's souvenirs of crime and punishment.
Organ, muscle.
Now, like the one-eyed giant of the original story, this Odyssey has its own monster.
Citizen. Broad-shouldered, deep-chested, strong-limbed, frank-eyed, red-haired, freely freckled, shaggy-bearded, wide-mouthed, large-nosed, long-headed, deep-voiced, bare-kneed, brawny-handed, hairy-legged, ruddy-faced, sinewy-armed hero.
The last of many Irish heroes and heroines of antiquity. Cuchulainn, Red Hugh O'Donnell, Christopher Columbus, Charlemagne, Theobald Wolfe Tone, the mother of the Maccabees, the last of the Mohicans, Ludwig, Beethoven, the Colleen Bawn, and the Queen of Sheba.
A one-eyed, ignorant racist and his dog, Garryon. Bloom is there to meet Martin Cunningham to discuss insurance money belonging to the late Paddy Dignam when he gets into an argument with the citizen about capital punishment.
That can be explained by science, says Bloom. It's only a natural phenomenon, don't you see? Because on account of it, you don't grasp my point. What I mean is...
Sinn Féin, says the citizen. Sinn Féin the Maine. The friends we love are by our side, and the foes we hate before us. What is your nation, if I may ask, says the citizen.
Ireland, says Bloom. I was born here, Ireland, and I belong to a race too, says Bloom, that is hated and persecuted also now. This very moment, this very instant.
But then all hell breaks loose when the citizen and his cronies think that Bloom has made a killing on the horse Throwaway that was a long shot in the race today and hasn't bought around.
Are you talking about the New Jerusalem, says the citizen.
Mendelssohn was a Jew, and Karl Marx, and Mercadante, and Spinoza, and the Savior was a Jew, and his father was a Jew. Your God!
Whose God, says the citizen, by Jesus? I'll bring that bloody Jew man there for use in no holy name. But Jesus, I'll crucify him, so I will. Give us that biscuit box there.
And the citizen chucks the biscuit box at Bloom, who escapes by carriage.
And they held the chariot, wherein he stood ascend to heaven. And they beheld him in the chariot, clothed upon in glory of the brightness, having raiment as of the sun, fair as the moon, and terrible that, for awe they durst not look upon him. And there came a voice out of heaven, calling, Elijah, Elijah! And he answered with a main cry, Abba!
Chapter 13, Nausicaa.
Nausicaa? Nausicaa!
Nausea?
Nausicaa!
Ulysses is washed up on the beach and is awakened by the princess Nausicaa and her maids.
Time 8:00 p.m.
Scene, the rocks on sandy Mount Strand, where Stephen had walked in chapter 3.
Organ, eye, nose. You can almost smell the sea.
Now, this is the chapter that first got James Joyce in trouble with the censors.
Well, it seems that at the end of the chapter, Bloom...
You're getting ahead of the story. Joyce must have had a ball writing this chapter. He wrote it like a cheap romance of the period, sort of like a Lifetime movie.
The three girlfriends were seated on the rocks, enjoying the evening scene and the air, which was fresh but not too chilly. Many a time and oft were they wont to come there to that favorite nook, to have a cozy chat beside the sparkling waves and discuss matters feminine.
Sissy Caffrey and Edie Boardman with the baby in the pushcar, and Tommy and Jackie Caffrey, two little curly-headed boys dressed in sailor suits with caps to match, and Gertie.
But who was Gertie?
Gertie McDowell, who was seated near her companions, was in very truth as fair a specimen of winsome Irish girlhood as one could wish to see. A surety God's fair land of Ireland did not hold her equal.
Enter Leopold Bloom. Gertie begins to fantasy about him watching her.
He was eyeing her as a snake eyes its prey. Her woman's instinct told her that she had raised the devil in him, and the thought of burning scarlet swept from throat to brow till the lovely color of her face became a glorious rose.
Oh, look, it's the fireworks, Sissy Caffrey said.
And they all ran down the strand to see over the houses and the church, helter-skelter.
Come on, Gertie, Sissy called. It's the bazaar fireworks.
But Gertie was adamant she had no intention now of being at their beck and call. She could see from where she was.
And so could Mr. Bloom.
She leaned back far to look up where the fireworks were, and she caught her knee in her hands so as not to fall back, looking up, and there was no one to see, only him and her, when she revealed all her graceful, beautifully shaped legs like that, supply soft and delicately rounded, and she seemed to hear the panting of his heart, his hoarse breathing.
Yeah, that will be quite enough of that.
That's what the censors said. It seems that while the Roman candles were bursting in midair, so was Mr. Bloom. But that didn't stop the publishing of the book, and in a touching twist to this chapter,
She walked with a certain quiet dignity characteristic of her, but with care and very slowly, because Gertie McDowell was tight boots? No. She's lame. Oh, poor girl. That's why she left on the shelf and the others did a sprint. Thought something was wrong by the cut of her jib. Jilted beauty. Glad I didn't know it when she was on show. Hot little devil all the same.
Because it was a little canary bird that came out of its little house to tell the time that Gertie McDowell noticed the time she was there because she was as quick as anything about a thing like that, was Gertie McDowell, and she noticed at once that that foreign gentleman that was sitting on the rocks looking was cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
Chapter 14, Oxen of the Sun.
Time 10 o'clock p.m.
Scene, the National Maternity Hospital, Hull Street.
Organ, womb.
Despite warnings, Ulysses' men kill and eat the divine oxen on the island of the sun. Helios, god of the sun, is so peeved he petitioned Zeus to punish the travelers. No, not death by chocolate, death by thunderbolt. All the crew members are killed, and poor Ulysses is lashed to the mast and drifts back to Calypso. Now you remember Calypso. It's going to be on the test.
Chapter 4.
Thank you. Ulysses drifts back to Calypso's island, where more years of sexual slavery await him.
Poor guy.
Send us, bright one, light one,
Horn, horn, quickening, and womb fruit.
Chapter 14 is the most difficult in the book because it rehashes the entire history of the English language while setting up the journey of the sperm to a fetus. He is also showing the development of the English language through the ages, starting with Celtic times. But we will not go into that now. We'll just hit the plot points.
Mr. Bloom has stopped in to visit Mrs. Purefoy, who's in labor at the hospital.
And the boys, including Stephen and Dr. Mulligan, are having a little party to themselves.
Including Banyan, who is having an affair with Bloom's daughter, Millie.
Some say it's Bloom who gives him a condom for the act unknowingly.
That's a lie.
But at the end of the chapter, Bloom follows after the boys to make sure that Stephen doesn't do himself damage in his drunken state.
And what about Mrs. Purefoy? What about the baby?
Decimalisimus, Decimalisimus, Decimalisimus. Send us bright one, light one, horn, horn, quickening, and womb fruit.
Hoopsa boy, a boy, hoopsa! Hoopsa boy, a boy, hoopsa! Hoopsa boy, a boy, hoopsa!
Don't ask. On to Nighttown.
Chapter 15, Circe.
Time 12 midnight.
Scene, Bella Cohen's brothel, Tyrone Street in the Red Light District or Night Town.
Organ, locomotor apparatus.
Circe the witch transforms Ulysses' men into pigs, but Ulysses, with the help of Hermes, forces her to free them. Now, in this chapter, Bloom follows Stephen into the red light district of Nighttown.
But first, he must confront his own sense of guilt, obsession, and sexual frustration in an hallucinatory confrontation with characters from his past.
What you making down this place? Have you no soul? I told you not to go with drunken goy ever, so you catch no money. Are you not my son Leopold, the grandson of Leopold?
Ja, ich weiß, Papachi. Mama?
Oh, blessed Redeemer, what have they done to him? My smelling salts, Sacred Heart of Mary, where were you at all, at all?
Polly, oh Polly, you are a poor old stick in the mud. Go and see life, see the wide world.
A prostitute named Zoe leads Bloom to Stephen, who was at the establishment run by the Madame Bella Cohen, described by Joyce as a massive whore mistress.
Bella Cohen and Bloom reverse their sexes and perform a ritualistic sadomasochistic humiliation of Bloom, symbolically freeing himself from the snares of Calypso, in other words, Molly Bloom.
Married, I see, and the missus is a master, petticoat government.
That is so.
We have met. Be mine.
Exuberant female, enormously I desiderate your domination. I am exhausted, abandoned, no more young.
Kneel, you must. Adorer of the adulterous rump, down on the hands, down.
Truffles!
Now, Stephen confronts his own demons at Bella Cohen's when his dead mother appears to him.
I was once the beautiful May Goulding. I am dead.
Oh, what bogeyman's trick is this?
All must go through it, Stephen. More women than men in the world. You too. Time will come.
They say I killed you, Mother. Cancer did it, not I. It's destiny.
Who saved you the night you jumped into the train at Dalkey with Paddy Lee? Who had pity for you when you were sad among the strangers? Prayer is all powerful. Repent, Stephen.
The ghoul, hyena!
Years and years I loved you. Oh, my son, my firstborn, when you lay in my womb. Repent, oh, the fire of hell!
Shite!
Stephen raises his ash plant stick and smashes the chandelier. Bloom takes care of the damage with Bella Cohen.
10 shillings? There's not 6 pence worth of damage done.
Bloom takes Stephen out into the street, where he gets himself beat up by a couple of soldiers.
Yeah, what are you saying about my king?
Nothing. He wants my money and my life. The want must be his master for some brutish empire of his. Money I haven't. Gave it to someone.
I'll do him in so help I'll ring the bastard, bleeding, blasted windpipe.
And he does, leaving Stephen laid out on the ground. But Bloom gazes at the unconscious Stephen and sees a vision of his dead son, Rudy.
Chapter 16, Eumaeus.
Time, 1:00 a.m.
Scene, the cabman's shelter, west of the custom house.
Organ nerves, a.k.a. a monster hangover coming.
Ulysses returns home alone. He goes to the hut of his faithful goat keeper, Eumaeus, when who should happen to show up but his own son, Telemachus. Reunited, father and son plot the deliverance of the besieged Penelope. Bloom and Stephen walk from Nighttown to the cabman's shelter for
A boiling swimming cup of choice concoction labeled coffee and a rather antediluvian specimen of a bun.
But first they meet a friend of Stephen's who is down on his luck.
There'll be a job tomorrow or the next day in a boys' school in Dalkey for a gentleman usher. Mr. Garrett Deasy. Trite. You may mention my name.
Now at the cabin shelter, they meet a sailor with some very tall tales to tell.
I seen queer things too, ups and downs. I seen a crocodile bite the fluke of an anchor, same as I chew that quid.
He took it out of his mouth, the pulpy quid, and, lodging it between his teeth, bit ferociously.
Like that. And I seen man-eaters in Peru that eats corpses and the livers of horses. Chews coca all day long. Stomachs like bread graters. cuts off their ditties when they can't bear no more children. See them sitting there, stark bollock naked, eating a dead horse's liver, raw.
Please, enough already.
Bloom shows Stephen a photograph of Molly and tries to get him to write lyrics for her songs. Bloom's starting to think how he can get his wife out of the hands of Blazes Boylan.
My wife is, so to speak, Spanish, half. That is, having been born in, technically, Spain, i.e. Gibraltar.
And as Bloom walks home with Stephen towards his house, Leopold once again waxes poetic about his favorite subject.
I just happened to be in the Kildare Street Museum today, and I was just looking at those antique statues there, the splendid proportions of hips, bosom. You simply don't knock against those kind of women here.
On to Ithaca. I mean 7 Eccles Street. We're almost at the end of our Odyssey.
Chapter 17, Ithaca.
Time, 2:00 a.m.
Scene, Bloom's house, 7 Eccles Street.
Organ, skeleton.
Now, this is the action-adventure part of the Odyssey. Ulysses enters his home disguised as a beggar. The suitors for his wife are all trying to string his bow, if you know what I mean, but can't. He steps forward, strings it, and then slaughter begins, after which Ulysses fumigates the house. Penelope, his wife, has slept through all of this. Amazing. Chapter 17 is in the form of a catechism. You might remember. Who made us?
God
made us.
Why did God make us?
What act did Bloom make on their arrival at their destination?
He forgot his key.
What did he do?
He
broke into the house. What was Stephen's excuse for declining a bath?
That he was a hydrophobe, hating partial contact by immersion or total by submersion in cold water, his last bath having taken place in the month of October of the preceding year.
Now Bloom and Stephen have a cup of cocoa, and Bloom offers Stephen lodgings with it, which Stephen declines. They go outside to the garden.
At Stephen's suggestion, at Bloom's instigation, both, first Stephen, then Bloom, in penumbra, urinated their sides contiguous, their organs of micturition reciprocally rendered invisible by manual circumposition, their gazes first Bloom's, then Stephen's, elevated to the projected luminous and semi-luminous shadow.
Stephen leaves and Bloom enters the house only to have
The right temporal lobe of the hollow sphere of his cranium come into contact with the solid timber angle, where, an infinitesimal but sensible fraction of a second later, a painful sensation was located in consequence of antecedent sensations transmitted and registered.
he hit his head and notices that the sitting room furniture has been rearranged. Signs of Boylan everywhere.
New clean bed linen, additional odors, the presence of human form, female, hers, the imprint of a human form, male, not his, some crumbs.
So what does he do? He gets into bed with her and
Kissed the plump, mellow, yellow, smellow melons of her rump on each plump, melanous hemisphere.
then he rests. His travels are over. Chapter 18, Penelope.
Time, none.
Scene, the bed.
Organ, flesh.
Molly lays in bed next to her husband and muses on the day and on her life.
Yes, because He never did a thing like that before, as ask to get his breakfast in bed with a couple of eggs.
So either it's one of those night women, or else it's some little bitch he got in with on the sly, and then the usual kissing of my bottom was to hide it.
I wonder, was Boylan satisfied with me today? One thing I didn't like, his slapping me behind going away. I'm not a horse, am I?
I wonder, is he awake, thinking of me, or dreaming? Am I in it? Anyhow, it's done now, once and for all. Why can't you kiss a man without going and marrying him first?
Oh, he knew the way to take a woman. Then, the night he kissed my heart at Dolphin's barn, I couldn't describe it. It simply makes you feel like nothing on earth.
Oh, I wish he'd sleep by himself with his cold feet. Give us room even to let a fart, or God do the least. Oh, better. Yes, that was a relief. Wherever you be, let your wind go free.
After my hours dressing and perfuming, he must have eaten oysters. He was in great singing voice. Oh, Lord, I wanted to shout out all sorts of things.
Oh, move over, you big carcass, out of the way for the love of Mike. And I'm to be slooching around in the kitchen to get his lordship his breakfast. Show them attention, and they treat you like dirt. It'd be much better for the world to be governed by women. When do you ever see women rolling around drunk or losing every penny on horses? Yes, because a woman knows when to stop.
Oh, Jesus. Wait, yes. That thing has come on me, God knows. There's always something wrong with us usual monthly auction. I bet the cat itself is better off. Oh, damn it. Damn it.
Wait. There's George's church bells. Wait. 2 o'clock. That's a nice hour for him to be coming home at. I'll knock him off that little habit tomorrow. I wonder, what sort is Daedalus' son? It'd be grand if I could get in with a handsome young poet at my age.
I wonder why he wouldn't stay the night instead of roving around the city, meeting God knows who. His poor mother wouldn't like that if she was alive.
I'll just give him one more chance. I'll get up early. I've a mind to tell him every scrap. Serve him right. It's all his fault if I'm an adulteress. How much about it? That's all the harm we ever did in this vale of tears.
I suppose that's what a woman is supposed to be there for, or he wouldn't have made us so attractive.
What an unearthly hour. I suppose they're just getting up in China now, combing out their pigtails for the day. We'll soon have the nuns ringing the Angelus. They've nobody coming in to spoil their sleep.
What'll I wear? Shall I wear a white robe? Oh, I love flowers. God, there's nothing like nature. The wild mountains and the sea and the waves rushing.
The sun shines for you, he said, the day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Howth Head. The day I got him to propose to me.
After that long kiss, I near lost my breath. Yes. He said I was a flower of the mountain. Yes. So we are flowers, all a woman's body. Yes.
I thought, well as well him as another. And I asked him with my eyes to ask me again. Yes.
And then he asked me, would I yes,
to
say yes, my mountain flower. And first I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me, so he could feel my breasts all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will. Yes.